So I just walked across coals that were 1,000 degrees, and I don't have a clue how I did it. None, but I did it. But I also felt a sense of exhilaration unlike anything I'd ever felt. I felt like I could do anything. It was exhilarating. It was just phenomenal. And you're with 3,500 people that are all feeling the same thing, right? So energy is up. Their self-worth, self-confidence, self-belief, it all rises. Our vibration just rises together collectively as a group because we all experience it together. Well, here's where it gets really, really interesting. And this is how why I decided to get into this, was the next day. And we're standing in the foyer, and I'm looking at everybody, and I'm watching them, and I'm listening to them, and I'm like, what's going on? I'd never seen or witnessed anything like it. People are talking, and they're really talking. They're really connected. They're laughing. They're talking about the firewalk. They're talking about their fears. I mean, it was just a beautiful thing to be part of and to witness. And I'm like, is this? I mean, wait a minute. Did we drink the Kool-Aid last night? Is that what's going on here? And, the answer was yes.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness into the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about walking through fire. I'm delighted to welcome Dave Albin. Dave worked for Tony Robbins for nearly 20 years as Tony's firewalk captain. Now Dave is the CEO of Firewalk Productions, LLC, and is the #1 firewalk instructor in America. You can learn more about Dave and how to experience your own firewalk adventure at his website, firewalkadventures.com, and I'll include a link in the show notes. Welcome, Dave. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Thanks, Lynn. It's really great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Dave, I am so excited to hear all of your stories. And as I checked out your website and as I read through some of the experiences and some of the testimonials, I was really struck with the statement of stop looking for heroes and be one. So is it okay if we start with that just a little bit of how is what you're doing helping us to become heroes? And why shouldn't I be just, waiting for someone to save me? Why should I step up to the plate?
Well, I think my first answer to the part of that is no one's coming to save you. It's just not going to happen. You're on your own. And so, we need to get that part figured out. And I think for me, a lot of that came from my 35 years of being in Alcoholics Anonymous. Yes, there are people out there that will help you. But AA is built on the premise that you've got to reach out. You've got to contact them and say, hey, you know what? I'm not doing a very good job here with my life. I've got court cases. I'm losing my family. I'm going to jail. And it never, when somebody shows up to AA, are they at the top of their game, right? Life's not exactly stacking up in their favor once they get to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And I was no different. I mean, I literally woke up one day on June 8th of 1988, and Linda, I was grossly addicted to heroin, cocaine, alcohol, cigarettes. I was in a lot of trouble. I was very suicidal, and I almost took my life that morning. And the only thing that stopped me was I had 3 kids that were my stepkids, and I loved them. And I knew that if I pulled the trigger on that pistol, that they're the ones that are going to die too. They're the ones that are going to suffer. They're the ones that have to clean it all up. And I didn't even know what PTSD was back then, but I knew that there would be a lot of emotional trauma. And I said, you can't do that. That's wrong. Figure out another way, sport. And I was having a real conversation with myself. And then all of a sudden, the next thing I know, there's a thought in my head, well, call Alcoholics Anonymous. And you know what's interesting about that, Linda? I didn't even know who AA was. I had nothing, no recollection. I didn't know anybody that was in AA. I'd never been to an AA meeting. I'd really never even heard it, yet there it was. And so I did. I called AA, and I got this wonderful, loving human being by the name of, I nicknamed her Madge. And the reason I nickname her Madge lovingly and affectionately is that she talked like this, right? And she probably smoked 2 packs of Pall Mall non-filters a day, and that's why her voice was so raspy. But the bottom line is that woman saved my life because I gave her enough information because she was the gatekeeper. She was literally the one who's going to say whether she would call somebody to come pick me up and take me to a meeting. And she did. And she sent a man by the name of Lauren, picked me up, and he spent the whole day with me. He got me to my first meeting, which was at about 12:30 in the afternoon. And he stayed with me for a 4:30, a 6:30, and an 8:30. And while I was there, it was an all men's group. Man, did these guys, they were all over me. They gave me a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they all wrote their name in it. And it said at the top, before you take that first drink, call one of us. And they just put their name and their phone number. And then they also gave me what's called a living sober book. And they did the same thing later on at one of the other meetings. And I went home that night and I didn't take a drink. And it's beyond a miracle. Because typically when you're coming off alcohol, that's one thing. But when you're coming off alcohol, heroin, and cocaine at the same time, I will just tell you, it's a bumpy road. It's not easy. And yet I got through that first night. And the next morning, it's 8:00 in the morning, my phone rings. And it's John from AA. And he's all enthusiastic that morning. He's like, "Hey, good morning, Dave. How are you feeling?" And I'm like, "How do you think I'm feeling?" Right? I mean, I want to kill somebody. And I might start with you, pal, calling me at 8:00 in the morning. He goes, yeah. He just kind of slushed it off, right? He goes, "Hey, I know where you live. We talked last night, and I know you live right around the corner. Let me come pick you up. Let me take you to breakfast, and let me get you to another meeting." And that's how it started, Linda. I mean, that was it. And so that's AA right there. That's who they are. That's why they're there. They're there to not only keep sober themselves, but they're there driven to help another alcoholic achieve sobriety. And so I learned early on that this is what AA is about. In fact, if you look in the preamble of AA, as you go through the steps and the traditions, it says, when anyone anywhere reaches out, I want the hand of AA to be there. And for that, I'm responsible. And I took that to heart because that's what they did to me. And so, one day turned into a week and a week turned into a month. And when I got to a month, they gave me a little medallion, right? A little chip. And it said 1 month continued sobriety. Then they gave me one at 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 1 year. I've never had a drink or a drug since. In fact, I just celebrated 35 years. Well, along the way, what was happening is when I was in recovery with AA, I had insomnia. And I was up late all the time. My sleep patterns were all over the place. And there I am one morning, 3:00 in the morning. And guess who's on the television? His infomercial through Gunthy Ranker, Mr. Motivation himself. A young Tony Robbins is selling personal power. And man, did he get me. I couldn't stand the guy, actually, at first. It was like, how obnoxious is this guy? He's all motivated. And it was just ridiculous, because I wasn't all that motivated. But he said two things that got me. One, he said that we'll do more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. And I remember thinking, whoa, okay, that's me all over. Because everything I did, drug and alcohol wise, I was trying to do one of those two things. I was either trying to gain pleasure or avoid pain. And it got to a point where none of it worked anymore, right? It had completely abandoned me. Then the other thing that he said that got me, he said, the two driving forces in our life where we make decisions from is out of inspiration or desperation. And I went, wow, okay, I'm pretty desperate. Maybe I ought to buy this guy's program. And I did. It was a 30-day program. When they sent it to you, you listen to a tape every day. But what I mean by tape came on these little white things called cassette tapes.
In the olden days.
Right. People go, what? What's that? Yeah. Go to the Smithsonian. You'll see what they are. And so I did it. I went through the program, Linda. I did what the man taught me to do, and it worked. Well, I loaned my tape program to a buddy shortly after I went through it. A guy in AA. Well, 7 years later, he calls me on the phone. And he said, Dave, did you know that Tony Robbins is coming to town? And I said, no. And he goes, come on, man, dude, we got to go. You got me into this. I was like, okay, fine, let's go. What's the date? Yeah, okay, I can go. He goes, great. I was hoping you'd go. I'll call you back. I'll make the arrangement. Well, he calls me back an hour later. And he goes, done. We pick up the tickets at will call. And here's what they told us to do. Number one, bring snacks. You're going to spend a lot of time in the room. What an understatement that is. Drink a lot of water. You need to stay well hydrated. Bring a good attitude and be ready to play full out. I said, okay. Well, how much was the ticket, Dan? He said $695. I was like, what? $700? He goes, yeah. You can pay me back. Don't worry about it. But I'm thinking, what's that today? 7,000, 7 million? I mean, I don't even know. $700. This was 1995. And so, and just he's getting ready to get off the phone. He goes, oh, wait, by the way, I forgot to tell you, we're going to be doing a firewalk. And I remember thinking, oh, hell no. No. Oh, no. This is all just going in my head. I'm not saying anything to my buddy, right? But I'm thinking, I'm like, no, that's a hard no for me. I'm not going to do that. Why would I do that? And you know what's interesting about that, Linda? I didn't know what a firewalk was. I had no idea what that even meant, but it didn't sound good. And fear had been controlling my life like it had been controlling it for 30 some years. And I said, no, I'm not doing it. And so, but I didn't say anything. I was like, yeah, sure, Dan, sounds good. Great. Yeah, see you then. Boom, hung up the phone. No, I'm not doing that. Yeah, I want to see Tony, but I'm not going to do no firewalk. Well, you get to the event. Tony takes the stage at 2:00 in the afternoon. And the next thing you know, it's after midnight. I've been in a room for 10 hours with Tony Robbins. It gets back to, bring snacks because you'll starve to death, apparently. And all of a sudden, Tony goes, take your shoes off. And I'm like, oh, no. I see where you're going with that, pal. You're not tricking me, right? And all of a sudden, I'm with 3,500 people, by the way, at this event. And they start taking their shoes off. And I'm like, people, no, don't go towards the light. You're falling for it. No, don't do it. Well, so now I got a dilemma because everybody's taking their shoes off except me. And now I'm going, okay, so if I don't take my shoes off, because he's going to take you outside, everybody's going to know that I'm not walking. And they're going to be pointing at me and, oh, look at that guy. So I'm like, nah, we're not doing it. I don't want that either. So just take your shoes off. It's okay. Relax. Just when you get out there, go hide in the back. No one is going to know. And so it gets worse, right? Because as Tony's got you going out there, he gets everybody to start clapping and chanting. So now I got 3,500 people going, yes, as you're walking out of this huge parking lot. Well, it gets worse because once you get outside, he's got African drummers, right? So now it's dun, 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 dun. Yes. And when you look over in the corner, Linda, there's a fire unlike you've ever seen before. It's a giant fire. It's about 30 feet wide, and it's probably 70 feet long. And they burn it all day. And all they do is keep adding wood, more wood, more wood, more wood. And what happens after 10 hours of burning, it just renders. And you have this giant, beautiful pile of, this blue flame coals. It's gorgeous. Well, logistically, how they set that up is they take a wheelbarrow and they go over to that pit and they load it with coals. And then they bring that back in between two lanes of sod, of grass, which is a fire lane, right? So, and that fire lane's 3 feet wide, 18 feet long. And they just take a shovel, flathead shovel, and they sprinkle those coals on top of that grass. And that's what you walk on. Well, as I said earlier, I'm having none of it. I'm hiding out in the back. Well, here's the thing. Tony Robbins chose firewalking because he did his research. He knows literally it's probably one of the most life-changing paradigm shift experiences any human will undertake. And he knows it. So he wants to make sure he gets everybody through it because it's that life-changing. So he knows there's cowards. He knows where we are. We're all hiding out in the back. So what's he do? He trains people to come find you. So I'm back there all by myself, and here comes this guy. And he makes eye contact with me. And Tony must teach him, look, once you make eye contact with him, don't take your eyes off him. Well, he comes and he's coming and he gets about 20 feet from me and he kind of looks at me funny, kind of bends down. And all of a sudden he says, are you okay? And when we're not okay, what do we say?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, fine. Good. All good here, pal. Nothing to see here. Move along. And all of a sudden he stops and he looks at me again and he goes, well, hey, man, are you going to walk tonight? And I said, absolutely not. And I said it to him with that kind of tonality. And he's like, cool, man. He goes, hey, it's no big deal. It's okay. We don't want you to do anything you don't want to do. And I thought, wow, I like this guy. He's going to get me out of here. Well, guess what? There's a stranger out there floating around in my life who asked me one question that changed my life forever. And I still don't know who this guy is to this day. And his question was, wouldn't you at least like to watch? And I thought for a second, yeah, sure. Yeah, let's do that. Let's watch these people burn their feet off. That should be entertaining. And he says, well, look, man, from where you are, you're not going to be able to see anything from way back here. Which he's telling the truth. I'm 100 yards away. I got 3,500 people standing in front of me. I can't see anything. I can hear it. They're chanting. They're clapping. The drums are going. People are already starting to walk, and they're screaming and yelling and celebrating. I mean, it is a dog and pony show unlike you've ever seen. It is intense. I've never seen or witnessed anything like this. And he said, well, just get in line, and eventually, you'll get up there, right? And he's telling the truth. He really is. And so I did. I got in line, and I'm kind of walking along. And again, I'm not clapping. But it's going on, man. All that thunder is happening. And all of a sudden, this guy comes up to me, and he whispers in my ear, and he goes, he knows when you're ready. When he says go, you go. And pew, this guy just disappeared into the night. And I'm like, what was that? Who was that? What was that about? And so now I'm like, it's like, what? And there's so many things going on at the same time. Your brain is just trying to figure out what the heck, right? And all of a sudden I get to a point I can't see in front of me because I got hundreds of people in front of me. But I could, if I look at an angle, I can see it. And Linda, they're doing it. They're walking. Every race, every creed, every color, every age, they are walking on fire. And when they get to the end of the lane, they're jumping up and down and they're celebrating. They're going nuts. And so I'm mesmerized, right? I can't take my eyes off it. It's like driving by a car accident and you swear you're not going to look at it, but what do? We stare at it, right? Well, that's kind of how I am. I'm mesmerized and I'm just watching these people and I'm not paying attention at all. I'm in a zone. And all of a sudden, boom, guess where I am? I'm at the front of the line. And so now I'm staring down in that fire lane. Those coals are on there and they're bright red. And there's a wheelbarrow there. You can feel the heat coming off and my heart is pounding out of my chest. I am scared to death. And all of a sudden there's a trainer standing there and the trainer says, eyes up. And all of a sudden I bring my eyes up, right? Well, duh. I'm in a room with Robbins for 10 hours. Guess the first thing he teaches you to do? Keep your eyes up. And look to the celebration end. Don't stare at what you fear. This is where you go wrong in life. Probably what you think is going to happen isn't going to happen anyway. And so now my eyes are up. And the trainer says, squeeze your fist and say yes. And I went, yes. And he went, stronger. I went, yes. Well, he could tell. He could tell I was leaving a lot on the table. I was not in a peak state. And he screamed at me. And he went, stronger. And so I threw my hands in the air and I screamed, yes, it's top of my lungs. And he goes, go, go, go. Pooh. I took off. Well, here's the first thing I learned about firewalking. When you take the first step, you'll take the second, third, fourth, and fifth. I promise you. He stages two guys at the end of the fire lane and they lock arms, right? And they stop you. And they're like, stop, wipe your feet and celebrate. And so I'm wiping my feet and I'm celebrating. And all of a sudden, I look back and they're bright red. And all of a sudden I realize I've burnt myself really, really bad. And I look at my foot and it's dirty, but there's no burns. Oh, it's my other foot. I look at it. It's dirty, filthy dirty, but there's no burn. So I just walked across coals that were 1,000 degrees and I don't have a clue how I did it. None. But I did it. Ever done that? Ever done something really cool? And you're like, yep, that's me. I did that, right? Well, that's kind of how I was. But I also felt a sense of exhilaration unlike anything I'd ever felt. I felt like I could climb Mount Everest. I felt like I could do anything. It was exhilarating. It was just phenomenal. And you're with 3,500 people that are all feeling the same thing, right? So energy is up. Their self-worth, self-confidence, self-belief, it all rises. Our vibration just rises together collectively as a group because we all experience it together. Well, here's where it gets really, really interesting. And this is how why I decided to get into this, was the next day. Because this is a 4-day event. That was day one, the night of. Now we're going into day two. And we're standing in the foyer of the venue, waiting to go in. And I'm looking at everybody and I'm watching them and I'm listening to them. And I'm like, what's going on? I'd never seen or witnessed anything like it. Humanistically, people were getting along, Linda, like it was just one of the most beautiful, gorgeous things you've ever seen. People are talking and they're really talking. They're really connected. They're talking, they're crying. They're laughing. They're talking about the firewalk. They're talking about their fears. I mean, it was just a beautiful thing to be part of and to witness. And so, and I'm like, is this? I mean, wait a minute. Did we drink the Kool-Aid last night? Is that what's going on here? And, the answer was yes. And so later in the event, I met one of Tony's trainers, a guy by the name of Ted Macy, super guy. Him and his wife, Mary, both work for Tony. And we're talking, I go, man, this must be really awesome to be in this environment, to be, around this positivity. He said, oh, yeah, there's nothing like it. It's phenomenal. And he says, in fact, you see all these people over there wearing those black shirts, right, with the red lettering on it or the pink lettering? And I said, yeah, why? And he goes, they're all volunteers. Every single one of them. There's over 300 of them here. We need about 300 volunteers to help put on this event. And he said, so if you think you'd like to come be part of the environment, when you get home, call Robbins Research, tell them you want a crew volunteer application, and they'll send you one. And if you get lucky, they'll pick you. And so I did. And I sent it back in. 7 weeks later, I get a letter back in the mail that says, Dave Albin, congratulations. You've been selected to crew with the Anthony Robbins companies in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Well, because my application told that I had a security background and I had a military background and I lived on a farm at the time and I knew how to use tools and drive equipment and such, they brought me in. In fact, they put me on the security team to help take care of Tony's celebrities. And then they also put me on the fire building team at the same time. And typically when you're a volunteer, you pay your way, right? You pay your airfare, you pay your hotel, pay your food, pay all of it. And so shortly after I crewed, I think it was my 5th or 6th time, they offered me a subcontracting position. They wanted me on the security team, and then they wanted me on the fire building team. And they hired me as the assistant fire captain. This was in like 95, 96. And then in 2003, Tony offered me the fire captain position, which meant that I would take over all of Tony's firewalks globally. Now, because I homeschooled, I told them, I can't do this. And they said, well, can we ask why? And I said, yeah, I homeschool. And they said, oh, okay, we missed that. Oh, well, what if we pay to have your family travel with us on the road? Since you're homeschooling, would that help? And I'm like, yeah, of course that would. So in fact, when I called home, when they made me the offer, I got my son on the phone who was 9 at the time. And he's like, so where's our first event, Dad? Sydney, Australia, Junior. And so there I was in 2003. I'm on the road as Tony's fire captain. And then in 2005, 2 years later, we set the world record. We did a firewalk in London where we firewalked 12,300 people. Now, I say it's a world record, Linda. I do want to disclose that Guinness Book was not there. However, to my knowledge, there's never been a firewalk anywhere close to that number of 12,300 people other than a Tony Robbins seminar, right? Whether it was 10,000 or 9,000 or 8,000. And then to move this forward, in 2014, I'm driving down the road. My phone rings and it's Google. And they want to know, are you the Dave Albin that does the firewalks for Tony Robbins? Yes. What can I do for you? Well, if you're not under any non-compete or contractual obligation, we'd like to talk to you about hiring you. And I'm like, well, okay, homeboy's a free agent. What you got going on? And they had 148 executives that were in a 9-month, very intense curriculum. And they wanted to use a firewalk for the graduation. Well, Google knows. Google knows what firewalking does. They've got all the data on all of it, right? They're even mentioned in the book, Claiming Fire. So anyway, I said, well, listen, guys, if you want to do a graduation at 2:00 in the afternoon, we can't do a firewalk. I don't do them during the day. It's a safety issue, a big safety issue. I got to be able to see the color of those coals. And I said, however, we could do a glass walk, and that's where I'll show them how to walk on broken glass. They went, literally walking on broken glass? Yeah, that's exactly right. And they're like, well, that's interesting. Tell us about that. So we ended up doing a glass walk for Google on the first round, and then we ended up doing another glass walk the following year with Google. And then the next thing I know, Linda, I'm at NASA. I'm at Notre Dame, Chick-fil-A, Remax, Heineken, Microsoft. I mean, the next thing I know, I'm on Linda's Corner with Hope, Healing, and Happiness podcast, right? So you just, you know what I mean? I didn't know. It was just one thing after another, other than I will say that I did prep myself. I was ready for that next adventure when it came along. And so, yeah, here we are.
That is an incredible story. Thank you for sharing and bringing in the pieces. And I had several questions. I was like, oh, I want him to bring up this and this and this. And you've covered so many of those just so naturally in your narrative. And that is beautiful. So now I'm going to go back just a little bit to our very first conversation. The very first thing is, don't wait for a hero, become one. And in your story, there were several heroes mentioned, several people who were influential, and how you said Marge saved you, and how this person saved you, and how this person saved you. But not one of them could have saved you if you hadn't taken that first step and chosen and said, I want to be saved. I'm ready.
Yep.
I want to do this. And so in this role, as we become the heroes and we become the things that we're supposed to be, when you start at the beginning and just feeling like, I don't want to live. I don't want to live. Right. And from that to now, where you have influenced over 500,000 people with the firewalk, plus many, many others, you are one of those heroes who has literally risen from the ashes or the hot coals to become something of a phoenix. It is beautiful. I would like, if it's okay, to go even a little bit further, where you said you struggle with some PTSD. And I would love to talk a little bit about when we get to that point where we're either avoiding pain or seeking pleasure. And sometimes we think that it is the addiction that is the main problem, but it isn't.
No.
The addiction is there to avoid something deeper. So is it okay if you share a little bit about your growing up and how you got from the beginning to that first spot where you were ready to transition?
Well, to back that up, I mean, I also believe that the two most important times in someone's life is the moment they were born, which I'll go back to, and the moment you figure out why. And so that transition has got both of those things sorted out for me. So when my biological mother was pregnant with me, I was in Hollywood, California. My mom was working at the Roosevelt Hotel on Hollywood Boulevard. And my biological father, was a pilot in Korea. And he'd hurt himself somehow in his head. I don't know any details of that. I just know that to save his life, they put a plate in his head. Well, it also took his life. And the reason I say that is because he had a lot of pain with that plate. And he complained about it all the time to my mom. And one day, 2 months before I was born, he turned to my mom and said, I'm going to the grocery store. And we never saw or heard from him again. And so when I was born, my mother already had 2 other boys from a different man. And my cousin and my grandmother, we were all living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Hollywood, right across the street from Hollywood High School. And when I was 5, my mom said, I can't feed him. And so she did a very, very loving thing. And she put me up for adoption. And her sister, my mom's sister, adopted me. So, she would have been my aunt. So Bob and Pat Albin adopted me and brought me from Hollywood to Long Beach, California. My dad was military, was an officer. He was highly decorated in World War II. And when they adopted me, they stopped drinking. Well, to fast forward it, now I'm 11. It's the first day of summer in 1964. We just came out of Kennedy had been assassinated the November of 63. My dad was working in the Pentagon. He knew a lot of stuff that was going on. The Bay of Pigs, all the missiles in Cuba, Khrushchev, the Russians, all of that was going on. And those missiles were there and they were going to use them. And so my dad knew. And so he was scared to death. I mean, he was intense, or tense, I should say. Well, when I was 11, they set me down the first day of summer and said, David, we need to tell you something. They set me down that morning and said, what we need to tell you is, my mom put her hand on my arm and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, David, we're not your parents. What? At 11? How do you process that? You don't. And they even went on to say, hey, your Aunt Dean? Yeah. My Aunt Dean? Yeah. Well, she's actually your biological mother. Well, and I'm like, I don't even like her. And the reason is because she's always touching me. She always wants to sit by me and be with me and hug me and kiss me and Well, yeah, duh. She's your mom. And I don't want to make real clear. She never touched me inappropriately. It was just she always wanted to be around me, right? She was somewhat manic anyway. And so when she would get around me, she was always very giddy and happy and so on. And so that's how that started. Well, one day, like probably, when right after they told me this, they started drinking again. Probably within 2 weeks of telling me that they weren't my parents, they started drinking. Now, I don't know if that's just because of that or the pressure or what was going on with my dad working in the Pentagon. I don't know. I just know they both started drinking. And my life took a hard right turn, real hard, because everything changed. These two wonderful people, my dad turned into a complete, he was just not a nice guy when he was drinking. Let's put it that way. And so they were gone one day. They'd gone to the store. Well, in the 60s, you could leave your kids home, right? All you did is call the neighbor across the street and say, hey, Joanne, Bob and I are going to the grocery store. David's home alone. If he needs anything, can he come knock on the door? Oh, yeah, sure. Tell him to come over now if he wants. I'll feed him a sandwich, right? And so that's how you grew up, as a baby boomer. And so one day they left. They went to the store, and I knew where they were. I knew where the booze was. They were hiding it in plain sight, and I wanted to know, what is this stuff? What is it about them drinking this that they turn in to these not so nice people? And so I went and got a coffee cup. I poured it about halfway full. It was brandy, nasty stuff. And boom, I drank it. Well, stick a fork in me because I'm done. I never had a chance, Linda. I didn't. I believe I was an alcoholic right on the spot because I felt exhilarating. It was like rocket fuel. And I immediately started thinking about getting more, hiding it, stealing it, whatever I had to do. And that was when the precedent was set. The pattern was started right there. And it got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And by the time I got to June 8th of 1988, again, I was grossly addicted to heroin and cocaine and alcohol. I had been married twice. I married my childhood sweetheart. It lasted about 2 weeks. I married wife number 2, and she got me out of California, got me to the East Coast. I married wife number 3. She was a bartender with the 3 kids that I mentioned. When I was going to put a bullet in my head, and I didn't, I knew they'd suffer for it. And then, there I was. So it just, that's how it started. And when I say PTSD, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know that there were patterns and, how these things affect you and the trauma and all that kind of stuff. But I truly believe today that I'm completely healed from that. I've worked pretty hard, and I wanted to, because the deal is for me is like, look, if you don't heal this, if you ever have kids, you're going to take it out on them. And so my last marriage was 23 and a half years, and my kids' mother was awesome. And I had 2 beautiful kids, again, who traveled with me with Tony Robbins on the road. In fact, their first firewalk, my daughter was 6 and my son was 9. They did their first firewalk. And my granddaughter, my second grandchild, was just born here on Good Friday. So she's a few months old. And my daughter lives about 20 minutes that way. And my son lives about 25 minutes that way in Boone, North Carolina. And, my life just turned into an absolute, it's magnificent. The other thing I believe is that every human has 2 lives. When you get back to this hero part, right? That every human has 2 lives. And the second one starts when we realize we have only one. And so for me, it was the transformation. And really, it was AA. Because AA is the one who gets you in there and really cleans everything up. You start, you realize you got a problem. You realize that there is help. You have to turn your will and your life over to some type of, at least what I would call some kind of spiritual connection, or at least a power greater than you. Then you start looking at your character defects and your shortcomings. You start, making amends with the people that you hurt along the way. And so you clean it up. And then finally, once you get to a certain point, it comes down to, trusting your group and your higher power. And, you clean house and you help others. And I think that's really the key. Because for me, my life has been about, you mentioned 500,000 people. I believe that if you help enough people get what they want in life, you'll always get what you want in life. At least that's how it's been for me. And I also think there's a real important connection between achievement and fulfillment. One's an art, one's a science. And if you don't have one without the other, or should I say more specifically, if you achieve at a high level and it's not balanced with fulfillment, I think that's total failure. Because I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs and hundreds of them per year. And one of the first things I tell them is, look, you're not going to get to the end of your life and say to yourself, wow, I wish I would have spent more time making money and less time with my family. It's not going to happen. So, state management is what it comes down to, is managing your state. And I think the two most important words on earth from how it's directed towards us is I am, and then fill in the blank. And you better be careful with what you say. I believe that you should never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, say anything bad about yourself. Nope, don't do it. Don't program yourself. In fact, it takes a lot more courage to tell yourself that you're amazing and you're wonderful and you hear and you have divine purpose and you're here to help others and you're magnificent at this and I'm wonderful at that, and just get really clear about who you are and why you're on this planet. I mean, we already know that statistically, right? If we look at the science and we look at the mathematics of being born, the number that's out there is we're 1 in 400 trillion. Well, that's pretty profound, right? How many billions of people on the planet? There's only 2 that can create you and I. So, that's no accident. And so my life has become one about encouragement and helping people live their best life. And if nothing else, it's to help to break through, who they are as far as, the courage side of things and who they are at their core. And once you get dialed into that.
And that's huge.
It is.
And you're talking about all of these different things. And I want, again, to just emphasize that no matter who we are, no matter where we came from, no matter what our story was, we have a chance to turn things around and to be able to turn it into something that is good, something that is fulfilling, something that we feel has achievement. And the firewalk and your glass walk are 2 ways to do this very, very quickly. And you also have something that's a little, I would say, milder in the experience level, and that is your board breaking. Yeah. Is it okay if we talk just a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap things up?
Sure, of course. Well, so there's a couple of other, yes, the glass walk and the firewalk are profound. And I love what you say, because that pays off immediately, right? As soon as I did that firewalk, I was out of my mind excited. When you do the glass walk, same thing. I watch the patterns. I watch them do this. So what we do with the board break, and companies love this, is that, so we just take a board, right? And it's, and we write some things on the front of it. We write some things on the back of it, something we want to move towards, something we want to move away from. And then I also invite them to write anybody's name on the board that you're in conflict with. So if forgiveness or healing or reconciliation is part of that relationship, get their name on the board. And then it's a simple martial arts move, very easy to do. I've done kids as young as 5 years old, all the way through, teenagers and all the way into adults. And I show them how to break the board with their bare hands. It's a martial arts move. And, you see it a lot in dojos and martial arts schools and studios to graduate from one belt to another. Then they typically will break a board. They'll either break it with their hands, they'll break it with their feet, they'll break it with their heel of their foot, whatever. And then they graduate and they get their new belt. So here, though, we just do it as a team building experience. And man, it's powerful. When somebody comes and calls me, I charge them $57 a person with a 100-person minimum. So it's $5,700 to have me come out. Plus they have to pay my way, right? They have to pay the airfare and they have to pay my Airbnb and my per diem. And then I buy the boards. And so, I cover the cost of that. In fact, if you want, I'll do something for your viewers. If they want to learn that board break, If they'll come to my website and book an appointment through my calendar, I'll spend 15, 20 minutes with them on the phone, and I'll show them exactly how to do it. Won't cost them a thing. There's no upsell. I've got nothing else to sell them. But I'll be more than happy. If they're a coach or a trainer or maybe a business owner or whatever, and they want to bring a really cool experience to the table, because, every business owner, entrepreneur, and CEO is left with the daunting task of what? Keeping people motivated, keeping them inspired. And a board break is a really, really fun experience. And they can take the board home with them. We've had people that frame it and put it up on their wall. And, it's a really big deal because, again, they'd never be able to do that or never. Let me say that a different way. They're probably never going to get the opportunity to do that unless they joined some type of martial arts studio. So again, for your viewers who, being on your show today, I'll do that for being on your show, and they'll just have to get a hold of me through my website and book an appointment, and I'll show them how to do it. Won't cost them, I'm not going to charge them a dime.
Oh, that's awesome. Dave, thank you so much for everything you shared today. Is there anything else you want to make sure we cover before we close?
Yeah, there is. Just understand how powerful it is, the words "I am," and fill that in with positive affirmations of who you are, and do them every morning, and work it into your routine. Drink good water, take care of yourself, exercise, eat right, and look to help other human beings. And if you do that, your life will become. My life is so fulfilled, Linda. It's unbelievable. I feel I'm one of the most blessed men on earth. Sometimes I got gratitude oozing out of my ears. And it took a lot of work to get there, but it doesn't matter how far down the scale you have gone. I will tell you this, there's a way out. There is definitely a way out. And I'll leave with this. I think one of the smartest, most intelligent things any human being can do on this planet is to reach out for help. Thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, thank you, Dave. I appreciate that so much. Yeah. In closing, I'd like to share a quote by George Adair. He said, "Everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. Today, I invite you to cross to the other side of fear so you can have what you want." See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for listening. Please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. And if you'd like to heal your life from the inside out, there is a free video series at hopeforhealingfoundation.org. Just click on the free stuff tab. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.